In those days lived the great Italian poet Dante. He described his age with extraordinary power. Writing in the 13th century and in Italy, he painted the papacy as the world beheld it then. And what did the world see then? It saw in the papacy the usurping man of sin, and in the Church of Rome, the Babylon of the Apocalypse. Mark, even the world saw it. Here a few lines from Dante's immortal poem on hell, purgatory, and paradise. Woe to thee, Simon Magus, woe to you, his wretched followers, who the things of God, which should be wedded unto goodness, them, rapacious as ye are, do prostitute for gold and silver. Your avarice overcasts the world with mourning, underfoot treading the good and raising bad men up. Of shepherds like you, the evangelist 'twas ware, when her who sits upon the waves, with kings in filthy whoredom he beheld. She who with 7 heads towered at her birth, and from 10 horns her proof of glory drew. Long as her spouse in virtue took delight of gold and silver, ye have made your God, differing wherein from the idolater, but that he worships 1, 100 ye. Ah, Constantine, to know how much ill gave birth, not thy conversion, but that plenteous dower, which the first wealthy father gained from thee. In this poem on paradise he says, My place he who usurps on earth hath made a common sewer, a puddle and of blood. No purpose was of ours that the keys which were vouchsafed me should for ensigns serve unto the banners that they do levy war on the baptized, nor I for sigil mark set upon sold and lying privileges, which makes me oft to bicker and turn red. In shepherd's clothing greedy wolves below range wide o'er all the pastures. Arm of God, why longer sleepest thou? In the end of his poem on paradise he refers to the Apostle John as the seer that ere he died saw all the grievous times of the fair bride, who with the lance and nails was won. You will observe that these beautiful and touching words recognize the historical interpretation of the Apocalypse. The Apostle John, according to Dante, saw all the grievous times through which the church was destined to pass. And what Dante saw, the Albigenses saw, and the Waldenses. What wonder was there in this? Would not the wonder have been had the saints remained blind to the fulfillment of prophecy so plain and palatable that even the world recognized it? In the sunny south of France, in Provence and Catalonia, lived the Albigenses. They were a civilized and highly educated people. Among these people there sprang up an extensive revival of true religion, and one of its natural effects was the bold testimony against the abominations of apostate Rome. Here is Sismondi's History of the Albigenses. On page 7 he says of them and the Vaudois, all agreed in regarding the Church of Rome as having absolutely perverted Christianity, and in maintaining that it was she who was designated in the Apocalypse by the name of the whore of Babylon. Rome could not endure this testimony. She drew her deadly sword and waged war against those who bore it. In the year 1208, the Albigenses were murderously persecuted. Innocent III, what a mockery his name, employed the Crusaders in this dreadful work. The war of extermination was denominated sacred. The Pope's soldiers prosecuted it with pious ardor. Men, women, and children were all precipitated into the flames. Whole cities were burned. In Béziers, every soul was massacred. 7,000 dead bodies were counted in a single church, where the people had taken refuge. The whole country was laid waste, an entire people was slaughtered, and the eloquent witness of these early reformers was reduced to the silence of the sepulchre. Thus began the tremendous war against the saints foretold in Daniel and the Apocalypse, and thenceforth it was murderously prosecuted from century to century. Early in the 13th century was founded the Inquisition, and full persecuting powers entrusted by the popes to the Dominicans. A remnant of the Vaudois escaping from the south of France took refuge in the Alps, where the light of the gospel had been preserved from the earliest times. I have visited the Waldensian valleys, and will try in a few words to bring them before you. You doubtless remember the position of the city of Milan on the plain of Lombardy. From the top of the famous Cathedral of Milan there is a magnificent view of the southern Alps. The plains of Lombardy and Piedmont extend to their base. The Alps are seen stretching to the east and west as far as the eye can reach. The sun at noon falls upon their crowded peaks. There they stand in rugged, wild sublimity, their lower slopes mantled with dark forests, their summits crowned with glaciers and eternal snows. To the west among these, beyond the city of Turin, rises the vast white cone of Monte Viso. Among the mountains at its base lie the Waldensian valleys. They are 5 in number and run up into narrow, elevated gorges, winding among fir-clad steeps and climbing into the regions of the clouds, which hover around the icy alpine peaks. These valleys were the refuge of the Israel of the Alps, Protestants long before the Reformation. These noble mountaineers resolutely refused to bow the knee to Baal. They were a faithful remnant of the early church preserved all through the Central Ages of apostasy. This folio volume is a faithful history of the Waldenses, written 217 years ago by the Waldensian pastor Lager. It contains his portrait. I have often looked at it with interest. The countenance is scarred with suffering, but full of spiritual light. Lager tells with simple clearness the story of the Waldenses from the earliest times, quoting from ancient and authentic documents. He gives in full their confession of faith and narrates the history of their martyrdoms, including the dreadful massacre in the Vale of Lucerna in 1655, of which he himself was an eye-witness. This book was written only 14 years after that massacre. It contains numerous depositions concerning it, rendered on oath, and long lists of the names of those who were its victims. It gives also plates depicting the dreadful ways in which they were slaughtered. These plates represent men, women, and children being dismembered, disemboweled, ripped up, run through with swords, impaled on stakes, torn limb from limb, flung from precipices, roasted in flames. They are almost too horrible to look at. And this was only one of the long series of massacres of the Waldenses, extending through 600 painful years. Milton wrote of these Protestant sufferers in his immortal sonnet, "Avenge, O Lord, thy slaughtered saints, whose bones lie scattered on the Alpine mountains cold. Even them who kept thy truth so pure of old, when all our fathers worshipped stocks and stones. Forget not, in thy book record their groans, who were thy sheep and in their ancient fold, slain by the bloody Piemontese that rolled mother with infant down the rocks. Their moans the vales redoubled to the hills, and they to heaven. Their martyred blood and ashes sow o'er all the Italian fields, where still doth sway the triple tyrant, that from these may grow 100-fold, who, having learned thy way, early may fly the Babylonian woe."